Welcome to All Pro Football Data. My name is Jim Coburn, and today's episode we are talking about mm, 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 Adonai Mitchell, wide receiver from Texas. So we're going to be talking about him in terms of his overall production profile. Mitchell transferred from Georgia to Texas in 2023 for personal reasons, but he is well known for some spectacular catches for Georgia. Wasn't very productive though because he battled a lot of injuries. But he's an interesting prospect this year. I think there's a lot of people. Some people have him as one of the top 5 best wide receivers in this particular draft class. I've seen him mocked in the first round consistently. He's probably going to test really well at the combine. I'm just going to throw that out there because he's a phenomenal athlete on film. But how did he test in terms of his production data? And that's what we're going to talk about today. In terms of offensive market share scores, which is you take a raw statistic gathered from school website or college football reference. The raw statistics are transformed into market share scores by taking an individual statistic and dividing it by the team total. The transformed statistic is ranked against positional peers to get a percentile score. And that score is weighed against the age score of a prospect, which gives you the offensive market share score. So essentially, you take something like a touchdown, 5 touchdowns divided by the team total, let's say is 50. That means that wide receiver had a 10% market share production score. You then rank that against every single wide receiver in the data set, and that gives you that number. So in terms of Mitchell's production, his MSY or receiving market share score was in the 48th percentile. His total offensive market share production score was in the 48th percentile, and his touchdown market share production score was in the 70th percentile. And this is data sets also based on 3,710 wide receivers since the 1969 NFL draft class. These numbers aren't great. They're not good. There are concerns here because when you look at the All-Pro average, the Pro Bowl average, the Pro Bowl threshold even, those numbers don't really come close to that. They do come close to the starter average, but they don't quite hit the Pro Bowl areas that you're looking for in terms of his data set. Now, moving on to wide receiver efficiency scores. You take a raw statistic from school website or college football reference. The raw statistics are then ranked against positional peers to get a percentile score, and that score is weighted against the age of a prospect. Touchdown percentage is the number of touches divided by total touchdowns, which gives you the offensive efficiency score. So efficiency scores essentially take into account how efficient was this wide receiver with the football in his hands. Did he get a lot of yards per touch? Did he get a lot of touchdowns per touch? That's essentially what efficiency scores are looking at. And in terms of Mitchell's efficiency, he did pretty well in terms of that. His yards per reception was in the 70 percentile, and his touchdown percentage was in the high 80 percentile in terms of that particular metric. When you look at the All-Pro average, the Pro Bowl average, and the starter average, he pretty much hits all within those areas that you're looking for in terms of that particular metric. Now, in terms of adjusted production scores, this is where you take the age of a prospect is scored from youngest to oldest on the day that they are drafted. Then the age score is added to the offensive market share scores that you have, strength of schedule and strength of team score, which is called SRS. To learn more about that, go to College Football Reference. Those scores are then ranked to get the MSA score, or market share, strength of schedule, strength of team, and age score. And then the pass score adds all market share scores, efficiency scores, age score, strength of team score, and strength of schedule score, which gives you adjusted production scores. What are adjusted production scores? Well, it tells you how productive was this player for how old he was, the level of competition on his team, and the level of competition that he faced each day playing on that team. That's what adjusted production does. It gives you that context for the production. Because there's a big difference between a guy that plays at Michigan, for example, and a guy that plays at Kent State. And the adjusted production scores kind of give you the ability to kind of unlock and understand, or kind of gives you a way to kind of weigh that in terms of the production scores. That way you're not just looking at this score the way it is. You're transforming that metric to give you context. Because context is key in terms of NFL draft evaluation. And in terms of Mitchell's context, he was fantastic. That's the main thing that's positive for him. 90 plus percentile in terms of his age, 90 plus percentile in terms of his MSA score, and 90 plus percentile in terms of his pass score. Those are all the numbers that you're looking for. And in this particular data set, it has 3,710 wide receivers since the 1969 NFL draft class. So In terms of comparisons for him, this is by far the scariest thing with Mitchell, okay? Doug Allen, Henry Ruggs III, Antonio Gibson, Josh Gordon, Cordell Patterson, and Paris Campbell. Those are the players that tested very similar to him in terms of their production profiles. In terms of guys that had below average receiving production, below average total offensive market share production. Their touchdown market share was just kind of meh. Their age scores were decent. Their MSA scores were okay. Their pass scores were okay. But this is kind of what you're looking like with him. This is what you're working with. You're working with a wide receiver that wasn't quite that productive, and a lot of that is because of injury concerns with him. But that's just is what it is with him. I think that that's kind of what you're kind of getting into with him. So what is the overall outlook for Mitchell? I think in terms of Mitchell, he profiles as a starter and backup wide receiver based on his production profile. I think the biggest red flag is his lack of production. That is scary, guys. It just is. And most wide receivers with that profile tend to find success in the NFL because, again, Cordell Patterson found success in the NFL. Henry Ruggs III, before he ended up going to, you know, I ain't gonna say he went to jail or prison, but before he ended up in the situation he ended up in, um, he was playing on the Raiders. He was doing okay, and then of course you look at the other wide receivers that were mentioned on that list. They're okay. They were NFL wide receivers. Josh Gordon, that's the one I was trying to remember. They were okay, but they also weren't consistent. Of course, Josh Gordon has some off the field issues in terms of the drug policies in the NFL, but I can kind of tell you what we're dealing with here. Mitchell is a high risk as a first round prospect. No matter how you want to look at him as a prospect, you want to look at his efficiency scores, you want to look at his age, no matter how you look at him, he's going to be a risky prospect. So, for whatever team takes him, you do have potential to have high upside with this pick, but you also have the potential that he's not going to live up to the expectations of his draft slot. And when you're taking wide receivers, who are by far one of the most bustable positions in the NFL, is the wide receiver position, that's a concern. That's a concern. That's a big concern. So those are my overall thoughts on Mitchell. Again, I don't think that he can't be an NFL star. I think there definitely is stuff on film and in terms of his production that could point towards that. But I think you can't ignore that what he did over the course of his career could spell concern for what he does at the NFL level. He'll have flashes to himself. He might even start a couple seasons. He might make some highlight reel plays. The guy can play, but he wasn't and he did not put up the consistent production that you expect out of a college player coming out. And that just is what it is. Could that be different in the NFL? Absolutely. Could it be the cliche, well, he's better in the NFL than he was in college? Absolutely. But those are the concerns with Mitchell. So with all that stuff out of the way, thank you guys so much for watching this episode. My name is Jim Coburn. You can follow my other work at Gymmetrics, at JIMETRICS. You can also check me out on patreon.com/jcoburn to get more data information as well. That's JCOBERN. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.